I used to think my 7 a.m. coffee was the only thing keeping me productive. It was actually the reason I crashed every single afternoon for 9 years. After 30 days of cutting it completely, I discovered a biological loophole that permanently fixed my energy levels, and I have not needed an afternoon coffee or a nap since. This is the cortisol timing reset. And once you understand what is actually happening inside your body in the first 90 minutes after you wake up, you will never think about your morning routine the same way again. If you have ever felt completely sharp at 8 a.m. and completely useless by 2 p.m., this video is the exact biological reason that is happening to you. And I promise you, it is not what you think. My name is Dr. Elias Seit. I am a physician, and I have spent the last 4 years looking at one very specific question. Why are so many high-functioning, health-conscious, genuinely motivated people still chronically exhausted? Not burnout, not a clinical disease, not a diagnosable condition, just this persistent, daily, low-grade feeling of being drained, of starting strong and fading fast, of needing more and more caffeine just to reach the same baseline you used to hit naturally. And what I kept finding again and again across my own patients and eventually in my own data was not a supplement deficiency, it was not a sleep disorder, it was not a willpower problem or a discipline or productivity system problem. It was a timing problem, a fundamental biology mismatch hiding in the most ordinary ritual of most people's days, the morning cup of coffee. Today, I'm walking you through the exact 30-day experiment I ran on my own body, the biometric data, the withdrawal headaches, the turning point I almost missed, and the 4-pillar protocol I built from everything I learned. There is nothing to buy here, no affiliate link in the description, no supplement stack at the end, just the mechanism, the data, and the fix. Stay with me to the end of this video. What I'm going to give you in the 4th section is specific enough that you can begin it tomorrow morning, and if you run it for just 5 days, your own physiology will make the argument for you better than I ever could. Let me start by painting a picture, and I want you to notice as I describe this how familiar every single detail feels. The alarm goes off, your eyes open, and your first conscious thought, not your second, not after a moment of orientation, your very first conscious thought is not gratitude. It's not curiosity about what the day holds. It's not even really a thought at all. It's a reflex, a biological pull so familiar that it happens before you're fully awake. I need coffee before I can be a person. Before water, before sunlight, before your digestive system is activated, or your blood pressure has stabilized, or your body temperature has risen to its functional range, you're already planning the delivery of a psychoactive stimulant into your bloodstream. And not just any stimulant, the most widely consumed psychoactive drug in human history. And I want to be clear, this does not feel like dependence. It does not feel like a craving. It feels like morning. It feels like the reasonable, responsible adult thing to do. Because within 20 to 30 minutes of that first cup, you get the feedback that confirms the belief. The fog lifts, the room sharpens, thoughts start connecting. You settle into your chair and you think, yes, this is who I am when I'm functioning properly. That experience is real. That sharpness is real. I'm not going to tell you that you're imagining it or that caffeine does nothing. But the belief that sits underneath that experience, the belief that the coffee is the cause of the clarity, that without it you would remain foggy and slow, that belief is where everything goes wrong. Because that belief is backwards. Here's the biology that almost no one in the wellness space stops to explain clearly. While you sleep, your brain is running one of its most critical maintenance operations. Through a network called the glymphatic system, think of it as the brain's overnight janitorial service, your central nervous system clears metabolic waste products that accumulated during the previous day. And among the most important things being cleared is a chemical called adenosine. Adenosine is your brain's fatigue signal. It's a byproduct of neural activity, and it accumulates continuously in your brain tissue the entire time you're awake and thinking and processing. The longer you're awake, the stronger the pressure to sleep becomes. This is called adenosine pressure. It's the primary biological mechanism of tiredness, and it's entirely healthy, entirely necessary for the sleep system to function properly.
During a full night of quality sleep, your glymphatic system works to clear adenosine from your brain tissue, which means when your alarm goes off after a good night of sleep, you wake up with your brain's fatigue signal at its absolute lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle. Let me say that plainly. You wake up with your brain's fatigue signal at its daily minimum. Biologically, in theory, you should have a window of natural, relatively clean wakefulness waiting for you on the other side of a good night of sleep. Your brain is primed and ready to go. And then you drink espresso. Now here's the part that almost no one never hears clearly explained. Caffeine does not give you energy. I know how that sounds, but it's mechanistically true. Caffeine works not by producing energy or alertness directly, but by blocking adenosine receptors, the docking sites in your brain where adenosine normally would attach to signal fatigue. Caffeine physically occupies those receptor sites. It puts a lid on the signal. It does not clear adenosine. It does not eliminate fatigue. It hides it. So the fatigue signal is still there. The adenosine is still accumulating underneath the pharmacological lid, building pressure against blocked receptors that cannot respond. And then, this is the mechanism that explains almost everything. Caffeine has a biological half-life. In most people, it runs between 5 and 7 hours, though this varies significantly based on genetics and liver enzyme activity. When the caffeine's half-life begins to expire and its concentration in your bloodstream drops, those blocked adenosine receptors begin to clear, and all of the adenosine accumulated while the receptors were plugged, all of that pent-up fatigue signal floods every available receptor at once. The pressure that built behind the dam releases all at once. That's the 2 p.m. crash. That's the wall you hit every afternoon like it's scheduled in your calendar, because it literally is. It's on your calendar from the moment you drank that first cup at 7 a.m. You set the timer without knowing it. 7 a.m. coffee, caffeine peaks around 8 to 9 a.m., afternoon crash at 1 to 2 p.m., give or take, depending on your metabolism. Not weakness, not a nutritional deficiency, not the carbs at lunch, not your personality type. A clean, predictable pharmacological rebound event produced entirely by your own morning ritual. And here's the part that really stopped me when I first wrote it out. The crash you are suffering every afternoon is not a problem with your afternoon.
It is a consequence of your morning. It cannot be fixed with an afternoon coffee, because the afternoon coffee just sets another timer for 8 p.m., which is why so many people who drink coffee throughout the day end up with disrupted nighttime sleep, which makes the morning fog worse, which makes the morning coffee feel more necessary. The loop closes on itself, and the dependency deepens with every cycle. And I know some of you are running a very specific objection in your head right now. I know because I ran it myself for almost a decade. But I have been doing this for years, and I function completely fine. I want to offer you what I wish someone had offered me when I said that. Fine is not the standard. Fine is not what your biology is capable of. Fine is the floor you have adapted to after years of chronically interfering with a hormone system that was built to power your mornings without any help at all. When you have spent enough time masking your natural energy architecture with an external stimulant, you genuinely forget what unmasked feels like. You normalize the compensation. You call it functioning. That is exactly what I thought, until I looked at the data, and then I could not think it anymore. Adenosine rebound is the first mechanism, but there's a second biological system being disrupted by early morning caffeine consumption, and this one operates more slowly, accumulates damage over longer time scales, and most people never connect it to their coffee at all. Your body runs a master hormonal rhythm called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is the central command system that governs your stress and alertness hormones, and every single morning in the window immediately following waking, this system executes a precise and powerful biological sequence called the cortisol awakening response, the CAR. Your body, on its own, without any external input, floods your bloodstream with cortisol in the 30 to 45 minutes after your eyes open. And before you react to the word cortisol with alarm, I need you to separate what you think you know about it from what it's actually doing here. Cortisol carries an almost exclusively negative reputation in mainstream health conversation. Stress hormone, belly fat hormone, the thing you want less of. And yes, cortisol spikes dangerously under conditions of chronic psychological stress, and that is genuinely harmful.
But cortisol's primary role in your biology is not pathological. Cortisol is a mobilization hormone. Its job in the morning is to, exactly what you think coffee is doing, sharpen your cognition, raise your alertness, mobilize stored glucose to feed your brain, prime your immune system, regulate your blood pressure, and prepare your body for the demands of an active day. Between 30 and 45 minutes after waking, your cortisol is at its highest natural level it will reach in the entire 24-hour cycle. Not after exercise, not after a stressful meeting, first thing in the morning before you do anything. Your own body is running its most powerful natural performance enhancement process for free, automatically, every morning. And then, most people drink coffee directly on top of it. When you add caffeine on top of your peak cortisol, you are not amplifying the effect. You are creating a signal collision. Your sympathetic nervous system receives two simultaneous overlapping mobilization signals it does not know how to cleanly separate. Heart rate climbs beyond what either stimulus alone would produce. Adrenaline enters the picture. Blood pressure rises. Your body interprets the combined stimulus as a threat signal rather than a wakefulness signal, because that is what the profile resembles. And in response to this repeated overstimulation, your cortisol receptors begin to downregulate. Your brain, running its continuous optimization calculations, notices that there's always an external stimulant present during the morning cortisol window. It reduces its own production accordingly. It literally dials back the cortisol awakening response because it has learned over weeks and months of repetition that the external chemical is going to show up and do the job. So, you're not just masking your natural energy with caffeine, you are training your own endocrine system to produce less of it. You are eroding the biological mechanism you were relying on and then compensating for the erosion with more of the substance that caused it. The dependency does not just deepen, it becomes structurally embedded in your hormonal baseline. I tracked this during my first week of the experiment in a way I had never tracked it before. My resting heart rate logged by my wearable was running 8 to 12 beats per minute above baseline every morning within 30 minutes of coffee consumption. My logged HRV, heart rate variability, the most reliable non-invasive marker of autonomic nervous system recovery, was measurably suppressed on mornings with early caffeine compared to mornings when I delayed. My subjective focus scores, which I was logging every 90 minutes throughout the day, showed a clear pattern. Sharp peak in the late morning, significant degradation in the early afternoon, and a secondary peak after an afternoon coffee that was consistently lower than the morning peak had been. Each caffeine dose was producing a smaller return than the one before it. What I had been calling peak productive energy was a low-grade physiological stress state that I had normalized so completely across so many years that I had entirely stopped perceiving it as stress at all. I thought that is what sharp felt like. It wasn't, and day 10 showed me what sharp actually felt like. I want to be honest with you about every stage of the first 30 days, because I think the honest version is more useful to you than the version where everything worked beautifully from the start. The decision to run the experiment was triggered by a single data point. I was reviewing a week of HRV trends and noticed that my two lowest recovery scores of the week both fell on mornings when I had consumed coffee before 7:30. My two highest fell on weekend mornings when I had slept later and not had coffee until 9. I had been collecting this data for months and had never once looked at it through the lens of caffeine timing. The moment I did, the correlation was immediate and obvious. That night, I decided, 30 days, no caffeine in the first 90 minutes after waking. Track everything. Day 1, alarm at 6:45 a.m. And I want to describe this accurately because I think it illustrates something important about the depth of the habit. Before I was fully conscious, before I had assessed how I felt, before I had decided anything, my nervous system had already initiated the coffee routine. The habit loop was firing before executive function had even come online. I was on autopilot toward the espresso machine before my prefrontal cortex had a vote. I stopped. I drank 16 ounces of cold water, I walked outside for 5 minutes, I let myself be uncomfortable. By mid-morning, the withdrawal was clear and present. Dull headache behind the eyes, the kind that sits just inside your forehead and pulses faintly when you move your head.
Not debilitating, but persistent and impossible to ignore. Focus felt fragmented. Sentences took longer to complete. I had the first cup at 9:30 a.m., 90 minutes after waking, and the relief was immediate and slightly unsettling in how obvious it was. That immediacy told me something about how dependent the system had become. Day 2, headache lighter, a different quality of fog, less acute than day 1, more like a general muting of sharpness.
I noticed I was drinking my delayed coffee more slowly, actually tasting it, which I had not done in years because I had been drinking it as a functional delivery mechanism rather than a beverage. Day 2 evening, I very nearly ended the experiment. I convinced myself that my work performance was suffering in ways that would be measurable and meaningful. I made a note of that justification and kept going. That note became important later. Day 3, something shifted. Not dramatically, not the morning person energy that wellness content promises. Something quieter than that and more real. I was awake. Actually, cleanly, unpromptedly awake. Alert without agitation, present without the edge. The way your mind feels after a night of sleep so deep and uninterrupted that you wake up mid-sentence of a thought you did not know you were having. I had not felt that in years. I almost did not recognize it because I had been so long without it. Day 7, headaches gone. The delayed cup of coffee, still at 90 minutes, was producing a noticeably different subjective effect than the 7 a.m. cup ever had. Cleaner, more focused, less of the jittery background noise I had habituated to, more like a precision instrument and less like a blunt stimulant. Day 10, I pulled up the performance justification note I had written on day 2. I looked at my actual output from that week. It was indistinguishable from any other week. The narrative of suffering performance had been entirely a withdrawal symptom, not a real performance event. By the end of week 2, the HRV data was telling a clear story. Average morning HRV up 11 points from my pre-experiment baseline. Deep sleep percentage, which my wearable estimates from overnight heart rate patterns, had climbed from 14% to 19%. The mechanism for that improvement is straightforward. Caffeine's 5 to 7 hour half-life means a 7 a.m. cup is still biologically active in trace concentrations into the early afternoon. Those residual caffeine molecules continue partially blocking adenosine receptors, suppressing the adenosine pressure that would normally build high enough to trigger robust slow-wave sleep initiation. Move the coffee to 9 a.m. and clearance is substantially more complete before midnight. Deep sleep recovers. HRV improves. Morning natural alertness increases. The need for early coffee decreases. The morning coffee habit was not just causing the afternoon crash, it was degrading the sleep that would have eliminated the need for the morning coffee. A self-sealing feedback loop that got tighter with every year I stayed inside it. What I'm about to give you took 30 days of personal testing, 4 months of reviewing the circadian biology and sleep pharmacology literature, and another 3 months of refining based on what actually held up over time versus what was a novelty effect. You will have it in the next several minutes. I call this the cortisol timing reset. 4 pillars, every one of them evidence-based, every one of them free. Pillar 1, the 90-minute rule. No caffeine in any form for the first 90 minutes after waking. Not espresso, not cold brew, not tea, not pre-workout. Nothing with a meaningful caffeine load. This is the non-negotiable anchor of the entire protocol and the one change that produces the most noticeable effect in the shortest time frame. The 90-minute window serves 3 simultaneous biological purposes. First, it allows your cortisol awakening response to complete its full natural arc without pharmacological interference. Your morning cortisol peak, which runs from roughly 30 to 45 minutes post-waking and then begins its natural decline, is left to do its job uninterrupted. Over days and then weeks, your brain gradually recalibrates its cortisol output upward toward what it would have been producing if it had not been competing with an external stimulant for years. Second, it keeps adenosine receptors clear during the window when your adenosine levels are naturally at their lowest. You aren't masking the clean wakefulness, you're inhabiting it. For most people who have been caffeinating early for years, this is the first time they've consciously experienced their own resting wakefulness in a very long time. Third, by introducing caffeine after the cortisol peak is passed and adenosine has begun accumulating again, you're using the drug at the moment it is most pharmacologically justified, when there is actually something biologically meaningful for it to do. 90 minutes is the evidence-based minimum. If you have slower caffeine metabolism due to a variant in CYP1A2, which affects roughly half the population to varying degrees, you may find that extending to 120 minutes produces even cleaner results. But start with 90. The difference between 90 and 0 is the majority of the benefit. Pillar 2. The morning anchors. When people hear that I'm removing their morning coffee from the first 90 minutes, the immediate anxiety is what replaces the ritual? And this question matters more than most people realize. Your morning coffee was never purely pharmacological. It was a ritual transition, a sensory signal, the smell, the warmth, the sequence of preparation that told your nervous system the night was over and the day had begun. Remove the pharmacology and the ritual disappears with it, which creates an uncomfortable void that most people try to fill with nothing, which is why the first few days of any caffeine delay attempt feel particularly bleak. The replacement anchors aren't about filling the void. They're about replacing a weak biological signal, external caffeine, with signals that are orders of magnitude more powerful. Anchor 1. Direct morning sunlight exposure. Within the first 10 to 15 minutes of waking, step outside, not to a window, not to a glass door, outside in the open air, where your eyes receive direct natural light without any glass filtration. Here's the biology. Your retinas contain specialized photoreceptors called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs, which are most sensitive to the short-wave blue spectrum light abundant in morning sunlight. When these cells receive sufficient natural light stimulus, they send a direct signal to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, your body's central circadian pacemaker, located in the hypothalamus. This signal does several things simultaneously. It sharply accelerates the cortisol awakening response, producing a faster, cleaner cortisol rise than darkness would allow. It suppresses residual melatonin production, which is still present in diminishing concentrations in the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, and is part of what creates morning grogginess. And it sets your circadian clock forward, anchoring the start of your biological day to a precise time, which improves the timing and depth of sleep initiation the following night.
The research on this is not subtle. Morning light exposure is consistently the highest impact single behavioral intervention for improving both daytime alertness and nighttime sleep architecture documented in the circadian neuroscience literature. It outperforms magnesium. It outperforms most sleep aids. It is free and it takes 60 to 90 seconds. Overcast days still count. You are not chasing UV radiation. You are chasing photon quantity, which is dramatically higher outdoors, even under cloud cover, than it is through any window indoors. A bright overcast sky delivers 10,000 lux or more. A well-lit office interior delivers approximately 500. 60 seconds outside, eyes open toward the sky, every morning. Anchor 2. Strategic hydration. Immediately following light exposure, drink 500 to 750 milliliters, roughly 16 to 25 ounces, before anything else, and specifically before your first cup of coffee. The physiological basis, during a 7 to 8 hour night of sleep, your body loses fluid continuously through respiratory evaporation and minor perspiration. By the time you wake, most adults are in a state of mild but measurable dehydration, typically in the range of 1 to 2% of body mass. This sounds small. It is not functionally small. Research across multiple study designs consistently shows that dehydration of even sub-2% body mass measurably degrades cognitive function, specifically reaction time, working memory accuracy, and sustained attention, and amplifies subjective ratings of fatigue, mood disruption, and perceived task difficulty. You are not drinking coffee to be alert. You are drinking coffee to compensate for being dehydrated and then attributing the effect entirely to the caffeine. Hydrating first removes that compounding variable. It also prevents caffeine's mild diuretic effect from deepening dehydration in a system that is already water depleted. And practically speaking, it buys you another 10 minutes of the 90-minute window in a way that feels active and purposeful, rather than simply waiting. Together, light and water, these two anchors do more biological work in the first 15 minutes of your day than any stimulant you could consume. Pillar 3. The optimal first cup window.
After 90 minutes have passed, after morning light exposure and hydration are complete, then you make the coffee. And I want to be clear about something. This cup is going to feel different, not because you've been deprived or because the anticipation elevated it, because the biology is different. At 90 minutes post-waking, your cortisol has completed its natural peak and begun its gradual post-peak decline. Adenosine has been accumulating again, not at a critical level yet, but at a measurable rate. Your nervous system is clean. There is no pharmacological interference competing with the caffeine signal. You're introducing the drug at the precise moment it has the clearest biological target and the least hormonal competition. For most people waking between 6 and 7:30 a.m., this places the first cup between 7:30 and 9 a.m., depending on your exact wake time. That may sound like a trivial shift from a 7 a.m. cup. The effect is not trivial. What you will notice typically within the first week is that the curve of the caffeine effect changes shape. Instead of a sharp spike followed by a fast degradation, you get a longer, more plateau-like window of sustained focus. The jittery background noise that you would normalize diminishes or disappears. The heart rate elevation is smaller. The experience of sharpness is cleaner, less edgy, more precise. And the afternoon crash either becomes significantly less severe or, in my case and in most of the people I have walked through this, disappears almost entirely because the caffeine is clearing your system earlier in the afternoon relative to your previous consumption timing, and adenosine pressure it was masking is not building behind a pharmacological dam for as long. On the last cup, no caffeine after 1 to 2 p.m. This is the bookend that makes the whole system work. Most people have caffeine metabolism rates that require 8 to 10 hours for substantial clearance. If you drink a coffee at 3 p.m., you have meaningful caffeine residue in your system at 11 p.m. Meaningful caffeine residue at 11 p.m. means suppressed adenosine signaling exactly when adenosine pressure needs to be high enough to initiate the deep slow-wave sleep your brain needs for full overnight recovery. Protect the 1 p.m. cutoff and you protect the deep sleep that makes the next morning's natural wakefulness possible. The whole cycle depends on this boundary. Pillar 4. The 5-day micro-experiment. I am not asking you to take my word for any of this. I'm genuinely not. I'm asking you to be a scientist about your own body for 5 days. Here's the experiment. Starting tomorrow morning for 5 consecutive days, do not consume caffeine for the first 90 minutes after you wake. Step outside within the first 15 minutes for at least 60 seconds of natural light. Drink 500 milliliters of water before your first cup. Have your last caffeine by 1 p.m. Track exactly 2 numbers, your subjective energy and mental clarity on a 1 to 10 scale at 9 a.m. after your first cup but before the morning gets complex, and the same number at 2 p.m., which is when the crash either happens or it doesn't. 2 numbers, twice a day, 5 days. That's 10 data points. You won't need to run statistical analysis. The pattern will be visible. Most people who run this experiment never fully go back, not because I told them it worked, because their own data told them. 3 months into this protocol, not the experiment, the permanent version, here's where I actually landed. My average sustained deep focus window extended from 65 minutes to just under 2 hours, confirmed across multiple weeks of objective task completion tracking. My morning HRV stabilized at a level I hadn't seen since my late 20s. My mid-afternoon, which had been the part of my day I actively dreaded for nearly a decade, became at worst neutral. On most days, genuinely productive. Not caffeinated productive, not artificially elevated and running on borrowed time, just clear and functional and steady. I want to address the objections I know you're running in your head, because they're the same ones I had. What about early morning work demands or meetings? The 90-minute rule is specifically about caffeine. It's not a prohibition on cognitive function, and it's not a claim that you will be impaired for 90 minutes without coffee. The impairment you anticipate in the first 90 minutes caffeine-free is almost entirely a withdrawal expectation effect, not a genuine biological ceiling. It resolves within 3 to 4 days of consistent practice. You are capable of a focused meeting at 7 a.m. on water and sunlight. You may have simply forgotten that because you've been using caffeine as a crutch for the expectation long enough that you confuse the crutch for the leg. What about social coffee rituals, morning meetings with clients, coffee with a friend, early team stand-ups with drinks? Order herbal tea, order sparkling water.
Or, and I want to offer this genuinely, not dismissively, actually examine whether the ritual requires the substance or whether the warmth, the pause, the conversation, and the signal of having deliberately stopped to share something are doing all of the social work. In my experience, almost no one notices what is in your cup. You notice. They do not.
What about people with highly irregular sleep schedules? Shift workers, parents of newborns, people whose wake time varies by 2 or 3 hours from day to day. The protocol anchors to your wake time, not the clock. If you wake at 3 p.m. for a night shift, your cortisol awakening response initiates at 3 p.m. The 90-minute window begins at 3 p.m. The light exposure happens at 3 p.m. The biology does not consult the clock on the wall. It responds to when your eyes opened. The protocol is fully portable across any schedule. What about the people who genuinely cannot feel anything different from caffeine timing? The fast metabolizers, the people who claim coffee does not affect their sleep. The CYP1A2 gene variant that confers faster caffeine clearance is real, and if you carry 2 copies of the fast metabolism allele, your half-life may be closer to 2 to 3 hours rather than 5 to 7. Even for fast metabolizers, however, the cortisol disruption mechanism still applies. The cortisol downregulation from habitual early morning caffeine happens regardless of how quickly you clear the drug from your system. The timing issue is hormonal, not just pharmacokinetic. Here is the thing I want you to actually hold on to as you walk away from this video. Most people who are struggling with their energy and their focus and their ability to sustain a full productive day, they are not broken. They are not metabolically damaged. They are not suffering from some deficiency that requires a supplement or a biohack or a more aggressive optimization strategy. They are suffering from a timing misalignment so small, so ordinary, so invisibly embedded in the most normalized ritual of daily life that no one ever thinks to question it, and they've been compensating for that misalignment with the exact substance that is perpetuating it. The cortisol timing reset is not about becoming a different kind of person. I drink coffee every single day. It is not about drinking less of it or feeling superior about your morning routine or adopting some high-performance identity that requires suffering. It is about understanding the biological architecture you are already living inside, one you were born with, that your body maintains automatically, that is more sophisticated than anything you could build with a supplement stack, and making one precise, small, evidence-based adjustment to align with it rather than fight it. 90 minutes, sunlight, water, then coffee. That's the whole protocol. And the version of yourself that wakes up already awake, already clear, already functional, not because you drank something, but because you stopped blocking what your own biology was trying to give you, that version was available to you every single morning you have ever woken up. You just had to get out of the way. If something in this video changed the way you're thinking about your morning, even one thing, hit the like button, not as a favor to me, because it is the clearest signal you can send the algorithm that content like this, no ads, no supplements, no optimization theater, just the biology explained clearly and honestly, is worth putting in front of other people who need it. Hit subscribe. If you want to go deeper on any of the mechanisms I covered today, the full adenosine pharmacology, how to find out your CYP1A2 gene type and what it means for your optimal delay window, or the complete sleep architecture protocol I use personally and have walked patients through, those videos are already on this channel. I'll link them in the description. And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Elias Sipe. This channel exists for one purpose, to help you understand the biology you were born with so you can live inside it more fully. No protocol to purchase, no supplement stack to build, no performance identity to adopt, just the science, the mechanism, and the honest truth about what the research supports and what it does not yet know. The 5-day experiment starts tomorrow morning. Drop your day 1 energy score in the comments, just a number, 1 to 10 at 9 a.m., and then come back and drop your day 5 score. I'm going to read every single one and build a dedicated follow-up video from the data you collect. I'll see you in the next one.